I am going to share with you 4 strategies that really work in supporting you in going against the grain. So, I am going to encourage you to continue to or to start going against the grain when it comes to status quo speech therapy if you're not already. And I know you're going to get a lot of pushback. I know it's going to be very hard on many different levels to go against the grain, and it's going to be much easier to go with the grain and take the path of least resistance. However, the stakes are too high. You cannot do that. You need to answer to your child that you're working with. You need to answer to your higher source. You need to answer to yourself, and you need to do the right thing. And doing what is right is not what's easy. It's oftentimes what's hard. But this is a child's life at stake here and a child's lifelong outcomes because we're working with children when neuroplasticity is at its highest level, and you can create optimal change by doing research-based practice instead of doing standard practice when it comes to speech language pathology. A little bit of background information is Holly Storkel, an eminent researcher out of University of Kansas, and is at the National Institute of Health and Child Development right now. And what she describes is currently we're in a 16-year lag when it comes to what the research says to do and what we're doing in our clinical practice. And an example of that, and what she is really an advocate for, is more complex treatment targets. So we need to use more complex speech and language targets if we want to optimize the gains. This research has been published, has been around for 16 years, and yet it's still not common practice. As a result, we are not making a difference when it comes to language comprehension. Meta-analytic studies from 2004, from 2021 have both found that speech therapy business as usual practice, following the multiple step directions, working on the grammatical morphemes, answering the WH questions, all of this decontextualized work that you can download from Teacher Pay Teacher, you can get the bundle and you can work on it and think you're making a difference. The research is indicating you simply are not making a difference. You're spot treating. I liken it to the thigh master. You're going to go buy the thigh master for thinner thighs. And what if you want thinner thighs, you need to run a marathon instead. You need to actually create change on a holistic level. And as a result of that, you're going to see differences in the love handles and in the thighs because you're doing something different on a larger scale that is compound, that it's multifaceted in nature. The research indicates is that if you want to create change, you need to challenge, and you need to challenge at a level that is higher. I find it very interesting that research for children who are in the special education system, their most common complaint is that they're not being challenged. So even the students want to be challenged. We need to give them the good stuff and stop being a gatekeeper and taking your time to decide what a child is able to do and not able to do. And instead, spend your time asking how. How can the child do this? And that's when we get into multimodal cueing, which I'm covering in the speechpathology.com, bringing literacy to life. That session will be today, Thursday, January 9th, on speechpathology.com, part 2. If you want to know more about how you can take a challenging treatment target and how you can effectively teach that treatment target using a multimodal method to diverse populations of children, how you can open that gate so that all children can have top shelf intervention, make sure, by the way, to check out speechpathology.com January 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be live. Make sure to register for that conference. It's going to be good. I'm going to have lots of props, and I'm going to literally roll up my sleeves, and we're going to do lots of hands-on cueing. It's going to be a fun one. Back to today. What I want you to do is I want you to go against the grain, and I'm going to tell you from my over 20 years experience of going against the grain, of all that I've experienced, how I've been able to carry on. I've even been able to been successful with everyone kind of pushing back against me. When I mean everyone, I've been pushed back by academia, I've been pushed back by admin, I've been pushed back by colleagues. I've received so much all directions because I'm doing something different. And when you're doing something different that people don't understand, their response is oftentimes one of aversion to it. People do not like change, especially if they don't understand what you're doing. I'm going to tell you what really was worked for me. These are four strategies that I rely heavily on to this day. And as a result, instead of like stepping in the pile of caca, you're stepping over it or you're stepping around it. You don't have time to wipe off your shoes. You don't have time to change your shoes. Don't let the caca, you know what caca means. Don't let that impact your mission. You're on an important mission here. You don't have time to change your shoes. You don't have time to wipe your shoes. The time and energy needs to be totally spent on these children. They need you. Their time is more important than yours right now. Their neuroplasticity in the brain is at the highest level. They don't need someone who's going to do status quo because they want to fit in or take the easier route and go with the grain. They really need all of your time, all of your energy. So I really want you to follow these four steps because I don't want you to water down therapy. I don't want you to do average therapy for students so you're not going to offend any colleagues or administration or anyone else because they're not doing what you're doing. That means you're most likely going to be going against the grain. And that means you are going to get a lot of pushback. And these are four tips that are going to keep you on track so that you can be the agent of change that you are and so that you can change lives. Tip number one is to know that knowledge is power. So every single thing I share, I can go and say, and here's the research. I can show you the numbers. Nothing is because I said so, and nothing is because of expert opinion, and nothing is even because of my clinical experience. If it is because of my clinical experience, I'll be the first to tell you that. I will tell you I do not have numbers for this. But this is a phenomenon that I'm observing that we're going to need a research to confirm that this is true. Because bias is real. Knowledge is powerful. So every single detail of my practice, I have the numbers for. If anyone were to call me, ask me the smallest detail of my practice and why I do it in that manner, and I will give you the numbers to support it. And that's because you need to be crystal clear about why you're doing what you're doing, because where your attention goes, your energy is going to flow. When I look at my intervention, it's all of the active ingredients. I've taken active ingredients from multiple approaches and I've combined them eclectically. This is the game changer in this intervention. When I've looked at interventions that are packaged and commercially available, I see that there's strengths in these interventions and there's also lots of flaws. My favorite quote from the Bhagavad Gita is to swallow the milk what nourishes you and spit out the dirt. That's how you're going to get top intervention. Suppose, for instance, you were doing the Atkins diet when that was popular. And you were like, I'm doing the Atkins diet, but I'm not doing any nitrates. I'm not doing any vegetable oils. I'm not doing any processed foods. Like, you're kind of like, I know better than what's commercially available. And I'm going to take the good parts of it, like not eating sugar, because sugar really isn't good for anyone. And I'm going to throw away the bad parts. Like, I'm not going to eat pounds of beef jerky and processed meats. That's what you have to do as a speech therapist. I know so many different approaches. I'm trained probably in most all of them that have some evidence base to them. And I'm very selective because I'm like, not this is not good, but this is really good. And I take and I take and I take and I take. So when you look at these packaged programs, buyer beware, because I will tell you, I have not met a packaged program that is not without significant flaws. That is where knowledge is powerful. You got to be crystal clear on This is what I'm focusing on. These are the active ingredients. These are going to move the needle. For instance, if you're thinking of the Atkins diet, which has a lot of flaws, I'm using that example because it's popular. You knew that it was taking sugar out of your diet. That's the active ingredient. You're looking at different approaches and what's good and what's bad, and you take what's good. So knowledge is power and that powerful. And that's why I'm always researching my practice constantly. For the last 20 years, I've been researching my practice. That's why I'm always reading research. That's why you're probably going to see me next week. Here's some 2025 research, random controlled trials. This is how we can put a practice on Monday morning. I'm not a bandwagon thinker where I'm like, jump to this, jump to that, jump to that. But those little details, those matter. I can give you another instance about that because I think a lot of us have struggled with weight. I eat huge portions of very healthy food. A salad takes up half a table, right? But if you look at the carb count, for me, someone who's insulin sensitive, if it's over 20 grams that I'm consuming in a 2-hour period, that will not be converted to energy because my body is not able to convert that into energy. And the excess will be stored as free radicals or fat. Details actually matter. And even if you're eating healthy food, if I'm going over that 20 grams of carbs, I gain weight because of that extra carbohydrate that my body is not able to convert into energy. That's just an example where the details of your practice really matter. And that's the case also in the field of speech pathology, in which I looked at little details and I would do A/B split design. These little details matter. This blend is more effective than this blend. This singleton R is more effective than working on L if you were to choose the singleton. When you look at those details, you're going to find the details too are needle movers. I always compare it to interventions from the body just simply because they're more well studied. And the research indicates that the brain and the body and the way it responds to our behavior, the way it responds to what we feed it and how we treat it is very similar. So I think we can learn a lot from that when it comes to intervention. So I use a lot of those analogies. Number two, this is very important. Protect your time and energy. Your time and energy is your most valuable asset. And I just keep calm and carry on. So a lot of times, if there's like a dig made at me, or there's a criticism of my therapy or an approach, like I know my numbers, and a lot of times it's kind of done in a passive way or kind of through backdoor channels. I just act oblivious. I think I'm probably giving out one of my greatest secrets is that I just like, phew, just let it fly past me. And this keep calm and carry on. The idea behind that is don't step in the pile of caca. Walk around the caca. I mean, sure, it's just going to take you a minute to clean off your shoes, but you don't have a minute for that. Sure, it takes you some time to buy new shoes. You don't have time to buy new shoes. Your time and energy are invaluable, and you need to make sure that that time and energy is not spent on nonsense. And that's why I like this Eckhart Tolle quote, which is sometimes letting things go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on. I just like let it just go past me. Like if I just see something in my mind, whoa, woo, and just, oh, there it goes. And I kind of smile in my head and I'm just like, oh, I know what they meant, but I don't have time for that nonsense. So it's just let it go by. So I just keep calm and carry on. But trust me, if you're going against the grain, this may sound like very simple advice, but it really works because the power is not in what happens to you, it's how you respond and it's how you perceive it. So if you just perceive it as ridiculous silliness that you don't have any time for, that's all it's going to be. You can go and change lives and you can carry on with your mission instead of getting all tangled up in nonsense. I'm so good at this because your girl here, all I've done is gone against the grain my whole career. So you should totally write these notes down. They really, really work. Let's look at number 3. Don't succumb to status quo to fit in. Now, I've done this as well. The stakes are very high, and sometimes people are adamant. about things. They're getting all riled up over this, right? And the goals should be written like this, because you need to work on who, what, where questions. And there's times where I'm like, okay, I don't have time for this. I'm going to do in therapy what I do, which is best practice. And this person in their little world, this means the world to them that I do status quo. So I'll write maybe who, what, where questions. That's the goal. By this time, they're going to be answering that. Is that what I'm focusing on in therapy? No. I'm focusing on a more complex skill. If you think of it like a compound exercise that works the whole body. So in my 30 to 45 minutes a week with the child, which is nothing, I'm not going to spend my time working on one discrete skill. We're not going anywhere. I mean, that would be as if someone came in and I only saw him as a personal trainer for 30 to 45 minutes a week. And I said, here's some hand grippers. And I want you to grip your hands and we're going to get fit, gripping our hands with these hand grippers. That's not going to get this child fit. It's the same principle. People like to pick these discrete skills to focus on and they're not moving the needle. And the research is clear that they're not moving the needle. And it's like you're giving someone hand grippers and you're squeezing the hand grippers to make them more overall fit, to create generalizable change. If you want to create generalizable change, if you want this child to speak more clearly, if you want this child to have better language skills, you're simply going to have to work on a skill that is more integrated and more complex. And then you're going to have a cascading effect. I use the burpee example. When you're working every muscle in the body, you're going to have generalized fitness gains instead of taking the hand crunchers. That's too often what we do in our field is people write these goals to work on these discrete skills. And if you observe their therapy, they're working on these discrete skills. You can compare that to they've got a thigh master going, or they've got some hand grippers going. They're working on this one muscle in the body to create improved fitness, and it just doesn't work. The research is showing it's not working. The research is showing us what is working on narratives to improve communication skills, to improve language comprehension, not decontextualize discrete skills, which is common practice today. So don't succumb to status quo. That said, there have been times where it's like, I know what's going to make you happy is to see those goals written in this discrete manner. Da 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 da. That is not how I'm going to get there. We're going to run a marathon in therapy, and that's how the thighs are going to tone up. And that's how we're going to lose the love handles. And that's how we're going to get rid of the bat wings, is because we're going to become fitter because of challenge. And we're going to use the entire body and integrate it in a complex manner. And that's what we have to think in terms of communication intervention. We have to stop focusing on a discrete skill in our goals and in our intervention. So, what I'll do is to make someone happy that is vehemently fighting for old school therapy, is I will put it down as this is a goal that's going to be achieved. These goals are achieved. Am I working on who questions, what questions, where questions, what doing questions in therapy? No, I'm working on the child saying narratives, taking multiple ideas, putting them in order, and then they're expressing them. I'm working on a much more challenging, much more integrated communication skills that produces generalizable gains. Then, when I pull out the PLS 5 at the end of the year and I ask the who question, the child gets it because the child spontaneously developed that from working on skills that are more integrated, more complex, and that are a higher level. There's a great article written by Amanda Van Horn and Mark Fay that says, do the hard things first. If you want to see gains, then in therapy, go for the gold. Aim high. Challenge creates change. The higher you aim, the higher the gains. So don't succumb to status quo. But that said, if I have to make someone happy, I'll write those down as objectives, and those objectives will be accomplished because that child is running up the stairs and I'm working at the top of the stairs in therapy. Spontaneously, they're going up the stairs in that developmental manner. Instead of crawling up those stairs, they're running up the stairs. And that's because I'm not working on discrete skills. I'm working on a compound skill. I'm working on a skill that improves semantics, syntax, grammar, phonology. It improves all of that simultaneously, making them out of 30 to 45 minutes a week. That's all you got. Insurance is only going to pay you 45 minutes a week for therapy. And if you're looking at schools, on average, it's 30 to 45 minutes a week, regardless of the severity. That's all you got to work with. If you're going to be working on discrete skills, I'm going to tell you, you're probably not going to go very far. Number 4, answer to yourself, the child, and your higher source at the end of the day. This is very important. If you are working for the appreciation of others, then you're probably not going to go anywhere. What I want you to do is work for yourself, the child, and the higher source. I'm thinking about when I first graduated as a speech pathologist. I was so lucky because I met a speech pathologist that was a floor time play therapist who worked with children with autism. And she told me, this is the best advice ever. You can write this down. She said, Kelly, at the end of the day, don't answer to your boss. Don't answer to yourself, the child you work with, and your higher source. And she said, I do that every single day. And that is how I'm able to sleep at night. She said, because in my workplace, I get so much grief because everyone says you need to stop playing and you need to do more working. You need to get off the floor. You need to sit at the table. They don't understand the value of play in therapy. They think it needs to look like work. It needs to look like drill and kill. They don't think that I'm doing speech therapy because I'm playing on the floor with a child. So she said, do you know what I do? She said, I play with the floor of the child, 365 days out of the year. And that one day when my boss observes me, we go to the table because I get an annual observation once a year. And when they come is that one time that I sit at the table, and the rest of the time we're on the floor. I was so fortunate to get that great piece of advice early on. She gave me, as a CFY, that strength, that power, and that permission to do the right thing, even if everyone around you isn't. You have to answer to yourself. You have to answer to the children you're working with. You have to answer to your higher source if you have one. And if you're doing that, you're doing right. To close this, I'm concerned about therapy becoming tribalized. In the past, it used to be called bandwagon thinking. Like people would be like, I teach this way and not this way. And they would jump on different bandwagons. That's all I do with every child I work with. And I'm this type of therapist. And I'm starting to see that right now due to social media, tribalism, in which people are identifying as a type of therapist that does this type of therapy, and it's very regimented, and everything else outside of that is bad. And it's very unfortunate because the children are going to suffer. I could see this playing a role now where if you don't do therapy just like this, just like our group of this type of therapists do it, you are going to be canceled. You are not an enlightened therapist. And I see a lot of that going on now. And that's another thing. I think that you have to be even stronger today because of the power of social media and the power of canceling someone because maybe they didn't use this year's terminology, which next year, of course, is not going to be politically correct to use at all, or perhaps they used some strategy that is not approved in this type of approach. And I really want you to not buy into that nonsense because I think that is just another pile of caca. And I hope that you would be discerning enough to walk around that caca or walk over that caca because you're on a mission right now to change lives and you're an agent of change right now. And you don't have time for this nonsense. This is way too high stakes, the work that we're doing to make decisions that are not based on research, but are based on politics or based on emotional or based on because someone said so or someone with the biggest following said so. That's just nonsense. That's just more caca. So buyer beware and don't buy into it. And that's why I think it's even more important than ever that you be extremely discerning about who you're going to answer to. And it's got to be at the end of the day that you're answering to the child first and foremost. You've got piles of caca all over the place, even more today than ever. Take all of this information, roll up your sleeves, and hopefully you'll join me at the drawing board today, January 9th at speechvillager.com. If you miss it, it's going to be in the library. Make sure to check it out. I think you're going to love it. Today's workshop is going to be very hands-on. The last workshop I think was super important, which is your why. Like, here is all the research. Here is the why behind everything that you're doing, because you're going to get a lot of friction when you do this, because this is not standard practice. This is empirically based practice. However, it's not status quo. We have a 16-year leg. So you need to be very clear on your numbers. You really have to know your research and why you're doing everything you're doing when you're going against the grain, because you are going to get a lot of pushback. That was the first workshop, if you like to get a little brainy with me there. The second workshop, we're going to get very clinical. I hope to see you there. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's do what we do best. Make the world a better place, one child at a time. You will always be first.